I got a
Actually,
question for
that's
you.
what I'm going to start with, Brian.
Why
Yeah.
did we just stencil one wall with leaves in that room? Why not stencil the whole room? And if you're going to do big tropical leaves, why don't we put some cockatoos in there too?
My wife is, and we're live on Facebook, so you're going to get the beginning. You're going to get the behind the scenes. My wife's pissed at me because I refuse to help her hang this wallpaper because it's wallpaper, and I just don't believe that it belongs. But this, I'm at my second home at the Lake of the Ozarks, and I come back to a back bedroom where it's quiet. And yes, this is what you get as my backdrop. So yes, I don't want my wife to see this because then it'll just be fuel to her fire.
I heard there's 250 people on motorcycles descending on lakes of the Ozarks right now. Are you participating in that?
No, I'm not, but they were all down this weekend. Yeah, it's a good time.
Good deal.
It's a good time. It makes the bars and restaurants very, very busy. So.
And it makes the COVID busy too.
Yeah, that's exactly why I stayed out of those bars. Good morning, LabCoatAgents, and those of you who aren't joining us on Zoom. We are back for another episode of A State of the Month with our good friend Brian Stevens from the National Real Estate Post. And we've got an agenda. We've got an agenda today to talk about a few topics that are extremely relevant to the industry. And I'm going to list them out for you. Again, if you have any questions, if you're on Zoom, throw them in the chat or the Q&A. We'd be happy to address them. But we're going to start with, I'm going to give you the agenda real quick. So we're going to talk about something that's kind of unprecedented, and that is the CFPB actually doing something good for a change by offering financial literacy. We'll get into that in a minute. But first, let's talk about a couple of important things that create conversation pieces for you realtors, which is one, the households falling behind. Brian's going to quote some stats on that. We're talking about getting behind on their mortgages, as well as the 36 states that still offer lost wage assistance, which is important for those falling behind. So, Brian, why don't we jump right into those topics and let's enlighten our audience.
So the whole thing with the CFPB, the first one is that they maybe they know something about financial literacy. We could certainly argue that point. But I can tell you this for sure. They don't know a damn thing about marketing, because this is, I think really for me, it's one of the best kept and timely secrets that they could have potentially put out at this point. So for those of you who are parents of any kids under the age of 18 right now, or frankly, even the ones who are over 18, especially those ones now, have you ever had a conversation with your spouse or your friend, and have you ever said, why in the hell don't they teach our kids how to balance a checkbook in high school? Why, of all the things that they don't learn, why don't they figure out how to balance a checking account? I've had that conversation with multi-generations spanning different lots in life, different career paths, you know, everything. And that seems to be a fairly regular conversation, you know, especially as your kids get older and, you know, you get this thing. Well, hold on a second. You know, it's, how can I be out of money when I still have checks left? That's an old joke, but we get the idea with our kids, especially when we feel like we're being turned into ATMs. Right, Marley Grant? Anyways, okay. So I think this is a conversation that a lot of parents have had, and it's a big frustration. And okay, so let's just take that and set that aside. At the same time, there's a lot of parents right now who are schooling the children from home through, you know, Zooms and Skypes and GoTos and things like that. So all the virtual learning that's taking place. By the way, if we go right through that green screen right there, on the other side of the wall, about 15 feet down, is a 13-year-old girl named Quinn Stevens. She's my daughter, and I try to bring in her every day to give her some type of routine for her schooling while she's virtually learning. Now, I also try to participate with my kids, not trying to make you guys feel guilty who don't. I mean, I know with work and stuff, sometimes it's hard. But here's what's happening. They're doing half the classes they would otherwise be doing. Now, I got my daughter who's kind of a self-learner. Of all my kids, she's definitely the one best equipped to deal with this type of stuff. If this was my son, who's 21 years old right now, this would have been like a nightmare. But I have a self-learner over here. But even at that, she's only going through half the classes. So parents trying to deal with work, trying to deal with homeschooling, virtual schooling, excuse me. And why don't they teach our kids how to balance a checkbook? We put that whole thing together and we have it from the CFPB. And we're going to give you guys a link here. Now, here's the interesting part about this. As I was going through it, they start as young as 3 years old. Financial literacy for a 3-year-old, that doesn't seem to make much sense. Well, it doesn't. From 3 to 5 years old, what they're doing is they're teaching them how to build different blocks and foundations and multitasking at a very rudimentary level that has been researched and is intended for 3 to 5 year olds. So as they go through the different age groups, you can plug your kids free of charge into these financial literacy classes, which will help them out for the rest of their life and would also help supplement what they're not learning in school right now and keep their minds active while they're doing this virtual learning. And then, you know, parents who have to sell real estate or they have to leave their house and it's complicated to do when your kids have 3 hours of learning, you just added another 2 hours of great learning per week or per day, whatever you choose to do. And you're going to improve your kids in the process. And again, all at the reasonable price of nothing. So here was my thinking. We're always trying to find a way to where we can get in front of our past client database, our family, our friends. You know, I always talk about our ecosystem, our personal ecosystem. And I think one of the big reasons for call reluctance from real estate agents and even mortgage lenders, when they're calling their past client database, they feel like it's always a handout type of conversation. You know, it's like, God, I don't know if I want to, hey man, you know, do you think you need to sell a house or get a loan right now? I mean, I need a handout here. Things are tough right now. I think there's always that assumption, and that's the big reason for call reluctance, because we're not putting our value proposition first. Now, if you call your past clients and family and friends right now and say, hey, how, especially if your database is organized and you know they have kids under the age of 18, you can share with them the site. Hey, financial literacy is a big thing right now, especially in these hard times where people are and underemployed. Your kids are probably virtually learning right now and getting half of what they otherwise would get. Well, we've got these great classes that are offered by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and they could help supplement some of that education for your kids at any given time of their influential years. Doesn't matter what age group they're in. And then, of course, ask them how they're doing. And then, of course, see if there's any way that you can be in service to them or their sphere of influence. But this is the ultimate icebreaker website that I found because it is timely as heck. A lot of people are thinking and talking about this, and nobody knows what's going on with this. I literally stumbled across this. So you've got something that you can deliver to your past clients, family, and friends. And if you spend the next couple of days time blocking and doing this an hour per day, I guarantee you there's business in there.
Yeah. So what would you suggest? Because first of all, you're right, 100%. I've said it a million times. Others have said it a million times, especially in our industry, because we see it. We see their parents who struggle, right? And it's like, this is who's teaching the future, which they're not teaching them. And if people would take this stuff more seriously, and like you said, the CFPB finally does something right, and they're not even letting anybody know about it.
Yep.
So what do you suggest an agent could do? What is something they could do to pass this down to their clients or to their offices or whatever?
It is simply a link. It's just a link. So you can, hell, are you interested in doing this? Now, I'm going to go right over here, and I'll see if I can go down here in the chat. So I just posted the link to this. So if you have somebody who's interested, and it's very self-explanatory. I mean, the page is laid out beautifully. So it explains to you the research they did, why they did it. It breaks down the age groups, what the curriculum are, and all the links to all the classes, starting from age 3 and going to the age of 18. It's very self-explanatory. So all you'd have to do is share this link. But I really want real estate agents to look at this as an icebreaker opportunity for you to have to get back in touch with some of those past clients, especially if we're unfamiliar with them. You know, I had a conversation with, this is one of the, everybody's had this if you've been doing this long enough. But, you know, Frank, I remember Frank, we decided right before he got out of lending full time, and he decided he was going to make one big push and call his past client database. So he called somebody who hadn't spoken with in like 6 months. And the guy, he's like, hey, this is Frank Ray. And the guy's like, hey, Frank, man, it's so good to hear from you. And he's like, right on. I haven't talked to this guy in 6 months. And he's asking me how I'm doing and how my family is. And, you know, this is a slam dunk. And then he says, you know, rates are down and this would be a great time for you to refinance. And the guy goes, oh, dude, I just did it. Oh. He just refinanced with somebody not named Frank because Frank was not the proactive one in the call. For those who call all the time, you see this all the time. For those who don't call all the time, it's happening to you without your knowledge. Like, we have to have these icebreaker opportunities to reach out to our past clients, family, and friends. I think the call reluctance is because we just don't know how we're going to have that icebreaking moment. This is the perfect icebreaker because you're giving absolute, true, perfect value for a lot of people and a lot of parents who are looking for stuff like this right now.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Awesome. So this is good information. It's kind of unique. And let me point out to everyone here, this is the kind of stuff that Brian's always bringing every 2 weeks. We're trying to give you reasons to touch your database, to touch your audience. And this is another great and super unique idea. Brian, let's segue right on out of this good stuff right into the households falling behind and all this, kind of slimy data.
Well, and here's another thing is if we know these statistics to be factually accurate and that we have a high degree of probability that they are because they're coming from the Mortgage Bankers Association and they're coming from other, the Brookings Institute and the National Association of Realtors are all coming together with very similar data. And here's what we're really finding out is we just over this past quarter, we saw 11 million more households. They just fell behind on their rent or their mortgage payments. This is just in the second quarter. 11 million additional households are falling behind because they're or underemployed. This is a big number, and it should not come as a shock to anybody. When people don't work and you quit giving them money, something's got to give eventually. It was kind of ironic, as we've talked about before, with the CARES Act, where we see property values escalating in every major metro area, and we see bidding wars and limited inventory in major metro areas. And we see unemployment going through the roof. Well, how do we reconcile these different points? And it was because there was a massive giveaway, a $3 trillion bailout in the CARES Act, and that kept people disproportionately afloat. Well, now that that money is running out, we're starting to see the true effects of this pandemic in having people, sheltering in place sheltering at their houses, and really not being able to go out and visit and go to the places that they would on a regular basis, restaurants, sometimes even your smaller mom and pop stores, all your cottage stuff. In the city of San Francisco, I think I told you about this before, but San Francisco, which was a thriving economy 6 months ago, over 55% of all their business fronts, independently owned business fronts, have shut down. 1,300 shops have shut down in the past 3 months, 1,200 are open, and that number is only going to get higher. So as a lagging indicator, finding out that 11 million households are falling behind on their rent or mortgage payments, it's because they're not going to work and they're not getting paid. So we know this is taking place. It should come as a shock to nobody. And by the way, when you're calling your past client database, talking about the CFPB thing to help their kids, keep this registered in the back of your mind that you might be talking with somebody who is possibly looking at a forbearance. Who maybe is underemployed, who possibly is unemployed, somebody who might have lost their job as a result of this whole thing and desperately need to sell their house before it turns into a foreclosure or a short sale, because that's the next step here, okay? So when you're calling, these are conversations that you should try to be figuring out when you're talking with your clients. Hey, Sally, this is Brian Stevens, the real estate agent you worked with over the past 10 years, sold your house 4 years ago. How's everything going with Junior? Good. That's awesome. Hey, listen, I'm dealing with this crap with my kids right now, and this homeschooling stuff is a real pain in my butt. And I'm watching what she's doing, and it ain't as good as like sitting in a classroom. She's doing half the classes. Oh, you too. Well, hey, listen, I found this really cool thing about financial literacy, so our kids can kind of understand when they get older how to not run up debt and maybe save a couple of bucks in the process. There's all these great free classes. Can I share this with you? Okay. So we have that conversation, that type of thing. And we segued, how's everything going with you? How's everything going with you and Bob over here? You guys doing okay? Hey, listen, I'm looking around right now and I'm seeing that a lot of people I know, especially in our area, are falling behind or having forbearances because they're underemployed right now. They're unemployed, And so is everything going okay with you right now? Are you looking at options in terms of what your housing situation and condition is? Can I help you out with this? Is there any questions I can answer for you? That becomes a very seamless segue for you to make. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of, reasons for call reluctance is we assume that our past client database doesn't want to hear from us. But how many people in 2008 who just buried their head in the sand and had their house get foreclosed on, and the sheriff had to kick them out of the damn place, would have been better served if a real estate agent went in there 6 months earlier and said, don't let this happen. There are better options. Right. So that's kind of the situation we're in right now. I don't think you should do this only to make a dollar. I think you have, you have your fiduciary, your moral obligation, your ethical obligation to your past clients, to your community, to start having these conversations, because this is taking place. if somebody's going to bury their head in the sand, it should not be the real estate agent, okay? It should be the real estate agent being self-aware of what's going on in real estate and reaching out to those clients who maybe aren't making the best decisions. So this becomes a very, very easy segue for you. And then let me just wrap up here. Well, here's still the good part. In 36 states, your and underemployed clients who maybe lost their $600 when the CARES Act expired, and we're looking at all the stuff going on in Congress right now, and they're not, you know, the HEALS Act is far, far away from being a slam dunk. But in 36 states, through the Lost Wages Assistance Program, your past clients who are un and underemployed can still get $300 per week. Now, I know this isn't everybody, but at 36 states, that gives me what, you know, a 72% chance that it's in your state. So this would be another great thing that you could offer. So we're not just figuring out what the conflict is, but also the resolution. So these are great reasons for agents to reach out to their database. And now is one of the most important times for agents to be doing this.
Brian, real quick question. What are your resources for the 11 million households that are getting behind in the 36 states? So those who are on here might want to go find it, read about it, and then reference it as a resource.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you can find it. This is a study that just came out recently. You can go to the Mortgage Bankers Association, their studies and their surveys. The National Association, by the way, the National Association of Realtors is constantly doing these type of surveys. The Bankers Association Research Institute for Housing America. So that would be the Bankers Association's Research Institute for Housing America. You know, and
say that one more time.
Sure. The Mortgage Bankers Associations, excuse me, getting tongue-tied, Research Institute for Housing America.
Awesome.
Now, here's another thing, just a side note. So when I do my shows, I have a number of different areas and people that I talk to find information. But a real easy one to do is if anyone has a Twitter account, just follow everything real estate and mortgage lending. Like it'll recommend to you like different options. And when you start hearing these names, type them in the search bar in your Twitter account and just start following all of them. And what I've done is I've built out a real effective Twitter news feed for everything real estate and lending. And that's how you're going to find stuff that's really off the beaten path. And we can start to, you know, read the tea leaves of what's going to be happening in real estate in coming weeks and months.
That's a really good point, by the way, because a lot of us don't use Twitter. And that is exactly what Twitter is best for, is news. Yep. And so if you can use it intentionally to follow what you want to follow, not the Kardashians or political stuff, which we know who likes to spend a lot of time there, you could be very intentional by what you follow and what shows up on your feed, and you could stay very hip. And I wanted to add, Brian, it's not just picking up the phone and calling, because if A, you've already done it, or B, you're just super reluctant, you know what? You could create content around this. You could create content that might catch somebody at the right moment when they're scrolling, and you say something about, are you in forbearance? Are you at the risk of running behind on your mortgage? I can help. And you create content around that. You could do mailers to a neighborhood. There's so many different things that you could do. You could do an email blast around this. In fact, I would do all of these things if I was you, because the odds of you picking up a seller because they're not thinking, oh crap, rather than getting behind on my mortgage, it would probably be smart to sell right now because I can get max dollar. I'll go rent for a little while I get my life back in order, and then I'll go buy again. And then guess what? You just had a sale. And now you have a buying client because you're the one who brought them through this. Brian, we've talked about this 3 or 4 times now, and I don't feel like we can talk about it enough. I mean, this is such an opportunity. I don't know if anybody is taking full advantage of this, because you're all, as realtors and mortgage lenders, insanely busy right now. And when you get insanely busy, what happens? Frank and I talked about this on your guys' show last week. You just get caught in the mud, right? And then you forget to do all of the things that keep the business rolling when we hit that wall, which we will. It's cyclical. It's always going to happen. So this is awesome stuff. With that, Brian, what else? Anything else to offer today? Or are we going to wrap this show up pretty early today?
Well, we can wrap it up, but the only other addition I would make is, we're talking about finding out this different information that is pointed and relevant to your communities and different ways that we can share it. You could shoot videos in community groups, and a lot of these community groups, that, you know, that service our neighborhoods, if they allow you to shoot videos in there and you're putting the content first, hey, I want to let you know, here's what's happening in our community, and here are the best options for people who live in Vacaville, California to take right now. I mean, I'm in a community of 100,000 people. I'm in a community group that's super active that has 75,000 people in it. So you know, 75,000 people, it's a built-in free audience for me. And if I decide that I can get enough strength to get behind a camera and shoot a video for 10 minutes to try to help out people in my community, you think some of those 75,000 aren't going to see it and say, shit, maybe I should be talking to Brian right now. He's the only one who's reaching out to me. I have a built-in free audience of 75,000 people. This is the redundant nature of what we're talking about, but this is how we make technology really work for us. Technology works best for us when it doesn't replace us. And again, we talk about this, but when we could use it as a leverage, like a leverage ratio. So if I use my phone, this is a one-to-one leverage ratio in most cases, right? You can call somebody one-to-one. You can create instant messaging groups or texting groups, and you can change your leverage ratio to 6-to-1 for that message. But through social media right now, and it's frankly, I think it's more destructive in a lot of ways than it is positive, but it's the world that we live in. If you have a community, a local community group where you have your real estate services being offered, and they'll let you shoot a video in there and no other realtor is shooting that video, and you're bringing them great content about what's going to happen in these dynamic next 3 or 4 months, why wouldn't we do that? It comes at the reasonable price of nothing, and you're dealing with a leverage ratio of, you know, in my case, 75,000 to 1. It's pretty good, yeah. Pretty good numbers.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's funny you mentioned that about the social media destruction and whatnot, because another segue into some really good news for Jeff and a few others that love TikTok. It's here to stay. Yeah. And I will say this to all of you on this. I know a lot of you might hate it, or you might get tired of hearing about it. But we mentioned Twitter, which is a very unique, we never talk about it. TikTok tends to be more in the conversation piece, but that is the future of social media. And it's so easy to create content on there, put it back onto your other platforms. I've already thought of one. I'm going to create a TikTok today about the 11 million households that are getting behind, as a way of just kind of alerting the world, because you never know who's going to catch my message. I'm going to create it on TikTok. I'm going to post it back to Facebook and Instagram. Who's going to hear it and say, man, I know my cousin, I know my sibling, I know my friend is going through a struggle. I'm going to forward this to them. And then bam, I made a connection. And you know what? What's the worst that happens? I spent about 2 minutes creating a piece of content. What's the harm in that? Reminding people what I do. And that's what I want you guys all to hear when Brian mentions that, because I know a lot of us get caught up in the mess and the nonsense that is social media. But if you use it intentionally, right, boy, can it be powerful.
Hey, so I think I saw that. How many users are on TikTok in the United States? They said it was like 100 million.
More than that.
Is it
more than that? Yeah, yeah. And now that Oracle is taking over the security piece of it, it's probably going to skyrocket in the next 12 to 24 months, because once everyone's secure, we still got to go through a little bit more nonsense with Trump and whatnot, and the administration shutting it down. It's not going to get shut down. Yeah. But once that security piece is in place and people feel comfortable, and then they realize that what people like me have been saying is true, that it is the future technology of social media, you will adapt, because it's just where everyone, it's just like you adapted to Facebook, whether you liked it or not, you did. That's what TikTok is. And whether it's TikTok or, Instagram picks it up and Reels becomes more like TikTok, that's the future of social. It is absolutely brilliant. It's a great content creator. I'm passionate about it. And I implore anybody, so that those of you that are on this call that are paying any attention, becoming familiar with it sooner than later will just give you an advantage, because most likely, if you use social media for business at all, you will find yourself on TikTok in the next probably 12 to 24 months. It's just the way that it's going. I can't tell you why. It just is. And it's because, I can tell you why, but it's because of the technology and the way the app uses. It's short content. It's what the world wants, and it's what they're going to become used to. And when they want something, they're going to bypass your 3-minute video for a 15 to 60-second video. So.
Yeah, and the wildfire nature of how it's taken off is pretty remarkable. And when you kind of look at when you look at anything, from your traditional phone to to emails, to texting, to instant messaging, to Facebook, to Instagram, throw Pinterest in there at some point, and Snapchat in there, and now TikTok, and you look at the evolution of all these different forms of social media, it's always the younger who are the early adopters of the newest forms, and then they kind of evolve into the older ones. Like the average age of a Facebook user right now, I think, is in their like late 50s or early 60s. But when you start to look at these other forms of social media and just try to have fun with them, which I think is a hugely important, because if you can actually have fun with it, then you might start to understand how it works, and then you can find a professional utility to apply to it. But when you look at these groups like TikTok that are just, the numbers are extraordinary. They're off the charts, and it's not getting shut down. Larry Ellison and Oracle are fantastic. You're really looking at taking your business over the next 10, 15 years, because you're getting the next generation of people who are going to be buying and selling homes, and they're going to be getting younger sooner than later, because there's not a lot of interest right now, and just the nature of how things are going with hiring that person, with necessarily a 4 or 6 or an 8-year degree. They're looking for young, smart kids, especially out here in California, who've got a real strong tech background.
Well, and don't forget to mention too, they're opening up a center here, a hub in the United States that is going to create 25,000 jobs. So it's going to be a player, man. It's going to be a big deal, and I encourage everyone to take it very, very seriously, because it's a thing, man, and it's here to stay. And you know what else they said? I read is Walmart never makes poor decisions. They very rarely jump on something.
Right.
And guess who's taking a 12.5% stake in this?
I saw that.
Walmart is. And why? From a marketing perspective. So if Walmart believes in it, by golly, I'm telling you right now.
I'm right there with you. And I'll tell you, we always think of who would be a good president to have. Or, we have this conversation. Why do we have to choose between these two guys? And you start looking at who you think would be a great president. I've said this for years now. Larry Ellison, who owns Oracle, I think is brilliant. He's just one of those Jamie Dimon, just kind of next tier level guys. And so, yeah, Larry Ellison is not going to be jumping into this thing with TikTok if he doesn't know exactly how the whole darn thing is going to go, because he is shrewd beyond belief.
And he beat out Microsoft. He beat out Gates. Yeah. I mean, what does that tell you?
Oh, he's a fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we went down a rabbit hole here, Brian.
Yeah, we certainly did.
Well, thank you, my friend. I hope everybody who was on today listened to this. Make sure you share it if you gain something from this. There's some really good stuff. Remember, the CFPB, the financial literacy, we put it in the chat. I'm going to add it to the Facebook post. And then, you know what? Go find this data on the Mortgage Bankers Association website about the 11 million households, about this 36 states with the lost wage assistance. This is all good content for you to bring back to your spheres and make you more relevant. So, Brian, once again, thank you, my friend. Let me make sure. Actually, we have one question here.
Sure.
It's a TikTok question, and they are probably behind the time on the news because they said, "Why do you think Trump is trying to remove it?" Trump actually has said that he has approved it because it's going to be. The security is going to be run here in the United States by Oracle, as we mentioned, and Walmart is also going to be a part of it. So it is here to stay, my friends. Brian, thank you so much. And
thank you.
We will talk to you. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks, and we'll bring some more content for you to deliver to your spheres of influence. You all have a wonderful week, and go pick yourself up a deal or two.
Go Beans. We'll talk soon, man.